So from my first job out of college in 1988, I have worked on, I did builds on IBM mainframes. And I've worked on or on behalf of teams doing builds, configurations, management, and deployments. Since 2006, I've helped teams visualize their workflow. And my passion over the last 10 years has been using Kanban to change lives. Visualizing the flow of work is important for a couple of main reasons. A, it's hard to manage invisible work. And two, it's a superb way to have a necessary conversation. And that's no matter what business you're in. And for ops teams, there are a few better ways to get alignment across an organization. So while my career is focused on engineering and operations, my talk today is going to expand beyond IT to include business teams, because it's the business people who are driving change. A year ago, at this Red House in Nashville, I listened to business leaders talk about their SaaS company woes, and two problems in particular were formed. One was the delivery of new product features was very slow in coming, not fast enough. And number two was the architecture constraints were pushing some system boundaries. So the COO was implying that things were on course, and the CEO was implying otherwise. So I watched two very angry, unaligned people 5 feet in front of me, and it set off my OO reflex. Lack of alignment it's not a good thing, especially at the exec level. Lack of alignment, it cascades down and out across the company, and it creates this unhealthy us-them culture. And it causes conflicts over priorities, and it puts the individual contributors that are at the keyboard trying to do the best they can in impossible-to-win situations. So my talk today is a story of how this company evolved from what was an us-them culture that last August day, a year ago, to a we culture over the course of about 6 months. In Nashville, they call this, or they refer to this as singing from the same song sheet. Do you want to hear more about this? Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to start by first defining alignment. These folks, they are aligned. They're on the same side. They take the same stance. They argue quite a bit about who and what and when and how and where, but the why is very well understood. Agreeing on the why is what allows them to eventually agree around the what and the when and the who. So the story is about the company I work at, LeanKit, and there was a focus on 3 things. The first is the customers, because it's the customers that are impacting business decisions. The second is the transparency of those decisions and the work itself, because people's lives are impacted by decisions, and we need to be able to see what the expectations are. And third is how teams get and receive feedback, because the willingness to talk about issues is the single most important factor for a team. I'm going to cover these 3 areas, and then I'm going to wrap up by offering you some actionable steps that you can take away to get alignment. I mentioned a couple of problems, one being some architecture constraints, basically some database issues that were pushing some system boundaries. You see, a very large company had just purchased an enormous amount of licenses, and the customers were beginning to feel the effects of architecture issues that hadn't been addressed yet. On top of that, new product features weren't being delivered as expected. And the elephant in the room was that product development was not delivering, and sales and marketing were unhappy. And the product development team, which included IT ops, their reputation was on the line. So this combination of architecture limits and not being able to deliver features was a symptom of a larger problem. Part of it, in the first half of 2015, the number of employees doubled. And we just didn't have the capability at that time to do large architecture changes while delivering new features. And then it boiled down to one question: do we make architecture improvements, or do we work on new features? Because trying to do both, it's like driving down the freeway with the engine out of the car. It's hard to do and nerve-wracking. And sometimes it takes a crisis to have a necessary conversation around prioritization. So in our case, this large customer, they're bumping up against the max number of users due to database constraints. That opened the door for business and technology leaders to have this frank conversation about priorities. All these feature requests were coming in, and sales and marketing were harping on what needed to be done. People were just hollering. They wanted other tools, they wanted faster loading, others wanted better metrics. And so decisions had to get made on what gets prioritized right now. The result of that was make some progress, even if it's just a little bit, but make some progress on the database constraint, and then focus on delivering features that these customers are screaming for. And we agreed to identify what are the top 3 features that need to be done, all based on customer demand. And also, there was a very strong acknowledgement that we can't do everything right now. We cannot be one of these companies that says, I'll do all these 33 projects right now. That's not going to happen. We need to get collective agreement on the top 3 features based on customer input and deliver them, because our reputation is at stake. And that decision paid off. In January 2016, that large customer that had been waiting months for this architecture fix came to headquarters at Nashville to say how happy they were that we invested in this architecture improvement, and it paid off. But because we didn't have the capacity back then to do those kind of changes at the same time as the other priorities, feature requests still weren't done yet. So we still had a bunch of unhappy customers who wanted better integrations and UX enhancements. And those were just the external customers. Internally, execs weren't happy. There was this expectation for increased sales revenue based on a new feature, and that feature slipped. So sales is still held accountable to the projected revenue numbers. They can't say, oh, the delivery slipped, so now revenue gets to slip. That doesn't fly. Luckily, it didn't come to that, but people lost sleep over that. And it wasn't just sales that was unhappy. Marketing was unhappy. Let's just say you can imagine how a rebranding effort that doesn't line up with expected features that marketing is promoting could create some problems. So we got unhappy marketing teams, unhappy sales teams because product development wasn't delivering as expected. Clearly a need for change. Started off with product development team admitting, fessing up to the delays and agreeing to work at being more predictable. They also agreed to let sales and marketing have more influence on the product roadmap. And there was one more thing, and that was the recognition of the impacts on other internal teams. A business exec had made a decision to investigate some new technology, promising zero impact on other technology teams. So what happens? It causes a problem, results in the ops team spending hours troubleshooting an issue in production because of this exec's special project. So for business people who go home in time for dinner with the family, it'd be good to understand and acknowledge the impacts that their decisions have and the sacrifice that a lot of ops people make while working on hotfix issues during dinner, only to get paged at 2 a.m. in the morning about a database issue. And when that happens, apologies help, but they only go so far. So there was a mindset that needed to be changed, particularly clarity on, let's stop talking about IT and the business as if IT wasn't part of the business. It's difficult to generate revenue when database servers hit 90% CPU. Protecting revenue is part of the business. I hear all the time, sales is everyone's job. don't know if others hear that too. But my take on it is, well, so is revenue protection. That's everybody's job too. But it can be hard for business teams to understand the value of IT outside of emergencies. But in order to move forward toward being aligned, we got to find a way. And here's where transparency helped, which is the second thing we need for alignment. In 2015, the business teams didn't know exactly what was being worked on or what the status of it was or when it was going to be completed. And product development wasn't yet in a position to consistently forecast when things were going to be done or when a new feature was going to be released. And so this led to a new emphasis on the roadmap. The roadmap had been in use for over a year, but it hadn't been well communicated. It might have been looked at quarterly, but not a lot of visibility on it. And this is what began to change. The roadmap that had been, the roadmap of the past basically evolved into this formal visual representation of the work, which started to get looked at a lot more frequently. This is the roadmap. And it represents work for 7 different teams in product development. This picture here is just showing the top 2 teams. But essentially, it's a view of 3 things. It's the work that's coming up next, that's been prioritized on the left, and the next step, queue. And on the far right, it's everything that's just been done, been completed. And everything in the middle is work in progress. Everyone in a company has access to this roadmap. So it's that visual language that everybody can see so we can get clarity on what's being worked on, what state it's in, what's coming up next, so we can begin to anticipate what's headed our way. See that white card in the top left? That represents a theme, sort of a theme of the month, if you will. A theme, we call them bundle of goodness. It's a bundle of goodness. It's just a high-level opportunity for generating revenue or for making a technology investment. The dark green cards on the board, those represent revenue-generating work. That's the new features and the UX updates. That's the stuff that sales and marketing wants to see. That's what they care about. And the orange cards on the board, they represent revenue protection kind of work. This is the sustainment, the keeping pods secure and reliable. And the light green cards, those are A3s. More on A3s in a minute. The theme is the very first level where we start to break down work. So we're going basically from theme to working software in done. And the breakdown level is tried to represent it this way. It starts with the theme. The theme gets broken down into A3s. The A3 is the main artifact that's used for having these necessary conversations, for planning and communicating across business and technology teams. It's designed to provoke conversations that need to happen. As far as like what and when and who and where. And the A3s are broken down into something we call DIVs, DIV, just stands for deployed iterative value. So when a div gets deployed, there's value in it for somebody. Could be an external customer, could be an internal customer. And the divs, they're sized to be something we think could be done in less than 5 days. So the layers are theme, A3, div, and then the divs get broken down into tasks. Blow it up for you here. So the themes start out on this roadmap board, and only after business and technology teams have had time to discuss it, they need to have their why this theme conversation. Once it's made it on this roadmap, it's got executive backing from sales, marketing, and IT. So everybody understands why we're doing this and what we're doing. And then that theme is worked on over about a 4 to 5 week time frame. The theme contains a bunch of A3s, or it might be a single A3 that spans across multiple teams. And then, so the rule is here, so the goal is to get better at breaking work down into small enough bits to improve delivery expectations. We're trying to set better expectations with the business. And the rule is pull the work across the board based on the capacity of the teams to do the work. And that's because we use a pull system, right? A system that's optimized for workflow efficiency instead of resource efficiency. More on that in a bit. But basically, new work isn't started until old work is done. The goal is to finish current A3s before starting new A3s so we can be efficient and get things out quickly. Because if when we tried to do architecture changes and new features at the same time, they took a long time to do. When we could reduce the number of items that we were working on at any one time, things started flowing faster. So I talked about A3s being broken down into divs that flow across the roadmap. On this one, it's just basically it goes from to-do, and then it goes through the different environments, dev and integration and dog food and production, and then live. Live here, live done on the far right, that means it is available for external users in production, where the in production column, that's a change that maybe has a feature flag still set. It's like a dark release, so it's not openly available to everybody yet. So breaking down this work into divs, this deployed iterative value, is what got people focused on delivering things quickly. People always ask, they ask me anyway, how do we break down work? Like, what's the right level? How granular do we go? Usually answer to that is break it down as small as possible. In our case, we break it down to the level where when it's delivered, there's a piece of value in there for somebody. So the company motto is, they call it FSGD, frequent, small, good, decoupled. And the divs are the frequent, small part of that. It's breaking down the work small enough so that there's some value. And the divs on the roadmap, those get linked to each team's Kanban board. So the roadmap was a roll-up of the A3s across all 7 teams in product development. There were 7 swim lanes on that roadmap representing 7 teams. Each of those teams has their own Kanban board where that work in their lane on the roadmap is visualized at the div and task level. So here's the IT Ops Kanban board. And the three orange divs that are circled within the blue box, those were the divs that were on the roadmap. And it's a visual, kind of in-your-face reminder that this is what we're working on right now. This is what's important. This is what we need to get delivered in the next 4 to 5 weeks. There's other kind of work on this board too, though. The red cards are defects. The boring beige color is sustainment work. The unplanned work, because they have a lot of unplanned work too, that's the green cards. And each team gets to choose how they're going to design their board. There's no mandate that says you have to design your board one way. And we're pretty clear in encouraging people not to copy other people's boards because their context might be different. So each team's empowered to create their own design for what works for them. For this team, it's really a blend of sysadmin, DBA, network, security. They do have a product manager on the team too. And because of all the different skill sets, they wanted to simplify it. So the middle area here, this is the meat of their implementation. It's just doing validation ready and then validation done. So it keeps it real simple. But notice the work in progress limits at the top of the columns allow for they're squeezing down the amount of work so it can flow through fast. Here's the A3 model. A3 is just this. A3 is a lean term, and the reason it's called A3 is because of the size of the paper that they're on. It's an 8 by 13-inch piece of paper, and it's the model that for us answers all the what questions. So in the top left, what does that feature do? What are the users going to get out of this feature? And each of these squares identifies the teams that need to participate in that conversation. So we have, what's this feature going to benefit? What's this A3 going to benefit? Who is it going to benefit? This is my favorite column down here. This is the sustainability impact. What's the impact going to be to sustain this feature or this change once it hits production? And in here we've got development, ops, marketing, sales, and customer success. So this A3 is provoking a conversation and bringing everybody to the table to have this conversation. And ops has a seat at this table. So the amount of, oh, by the way, you need to do this yesterday, those conversations are rarer and rarer now. The A3 got more conversations started and solved a lot of angst early and up front. Up in the top right-hand corner, product manager works on cost of delay, which is the value we think we're going to lose by not doing something. And that helps drive conversations around priorities. Because when you're in a room with a bunch of execs and you're looking at the top 5 A3s and you're trying to decide which one gets to go next, instead of saying we need to do all of them, they're saying what are the top 3? What are the top 3 things? And cost of delay weighs into that. So this avoids all the prioritization by who's ever yelling the loudest or who's ever got the nicest shoes or whoever the loudest, obnoxious extrovert is in the room. And so these are born in planning sessions where everybody has input. And then once it's drafted, they just scan it and attach it to the light green card on the roadmap. Here's a picture of a real A3. It's handwritten. They're posted on the wall, A3 wall next to the kitchen. And these actually get popped into our Slack channel for remote folks to view. Which kind of brings us to communication. We have a lot of remote people working with us, and how do we do? Communication is always cited as a problem, always. So for us, we try and improve that. Every Tuesday, we gather in the big open space, and each of the 7 teams demos their latest divs. And some can do this remotely, but the whole company is invited, and I really look forward to it because I get to see what's coming up and what people are working on. Each team only gets 5 minutes to present their what they recently completed, and they all kind of use this format. It's like, what they did, why it was important, and what they're doing next. So what, and then what next, from the perspective of what can we deploy that's going to be valuable to somebody. So it's a popular way for business and technology teams to see and hear what's going on, but here's a problem we had. So we asked business to give us feedback on the demo divs. What do you think about this? Because they had been clamoring for it. What's coming up? We want to know what's going to be delivered. And they said they really liked seeing what features were going to be coming up. But the other stuff, the stuff that Ops was talking about, like the platform they were trying to roll out and the details of their config issues, they didn't care about that. They didn't want to hear about it. So they asked, can we restructure this demo div so just the stuff that we care about is in the first 30 minutes and all the other stuff that we don't care about, like we can just leave and go back to work? And the answer to that was, not really. The work that Ops is doing is important for the business. It's part of the business. But maybe we need to change our language so that we can communicate that better to help you see that. And so issues here, how do operations teams demonstrate business value? It's a question that I've been struggling with because 99% uptime, it does, what else? Like, it's not the biggest thing that business folks are worried about. And I think it'd be a great topic for an open space. I mentioned our A3 wall. Here's the A3 wall, which is next to the kitchen. If you're going to have any kind of communication out there, like a physical board, if it's next to the coffee, well done. People will stand around and look at it. So once the A3s are put in use, the discussions between marketing and sales, I can't emphasize enough how much that communication improved, just walking them through that thought process. We do retros. They're team independent. A lot of the teams use Lean Coffee to do their retros. There's a link there about Lean Coffee. If you're not familiar with it, suggest you check it out. It's a way for people to have a meeting and talk and build their own agenda in a democratic fashion and talk about what they are interested in instead of a manager just building the agenda that nobody wants to talk about. We also do these things called tribal council. I know it sounds like a thing where someone gets voted off the team, but it's not. It's a forum to raise issues. It's a place to escalate problems, usually high-risk stuff. Tribal council is emerging for us. It was actually pretty awful in the beginning. People were not comfortable talking about some problems. But it's coming along. The issues are getting visibility, and the willingness to talk about some more heated issues is starting to get the attention it needs. Part of the problem is that as humans, we're so busy managing impressions that we don't contribute to creating a place where people can learn. And when people don't talk about the problems, learning deteriorates and people suffer. So I came across this 2-year study that Google had did that shows that who is on the team matters much less than how the people on the team interact. And that the most important factor for the team was the willingness to talk about errors. And it's based on research that Amy Edmondson did. She's from Harvard, and she has a TED Talk on building a psychologically safe workplace that I recommend you all watch. It turns out that communication has a lot more to do about listening than talking. We work with brilliant people who are soft-spoken introverts, but many people find themselves closet introverts. All the self-help books out there, and I've read them all, they all tell us, we got to be an extrovert, you got to be bold, you got to lean in, you got to, have a seat at the table, you got to be confident. There's a Stanford study out that shows that people choose, loud, obnoxious, maybe not so competent extroverts as leaders over brilliant, competent, soft-spoken introverts. And I could go off on a tangent about that all day, but I'll save that for another day so we can wrap this up here. In order to get alignment across all levels of the organization, there has to be absolute clarity in the purpose and the focus, clarity on what makes customers happy, clarity on decisions and goals, priorities, why we're doing this, and clarity on communication protocol. And here's the takeaways for you. For the innovators in the room, how can you bring transparency to the priorities, to the expectations, to the dependencies, so you can help others understand what's going on and why, so they too can carry that forward. They can find a way. Transparency spawns clarity, and when there's increased clarity, it's going to aid in alignment. For the doers in the room, the people who get things done, can you investigate customer satisfaction or recommendation levels? Like, do your customers like the product? Have they had a bad experience? And whether that's an internal customer, which is somebody you're handing your work off to, or an external customer, they're driving business decisions that we need to agree on. So we use a combination of Net Promoter Score and open dialogue to get that feedback. And for the influencers here, how can you shift perception from no, it's not that, to how do we make things better? How can you influence the way teams are measured for success? How can you influence a way for people to feel safe when given feedback? Because in order to win, we need everyone. This means that everyone must believe that his or her voice matters. Like J.K. Rowling says, we're only as strong as we are united. Thank you.